So, with me right now is Alessandro from MS Edizioni, which is an Italian publisher of role-playing games and games in general, right?
Yes, it started as a distributor for games and board games and card games. And recently, last year, in full pandemic, it started publishing also role-playing games.
Yes, I've seen that you are, among other things, that you are the publisher of Dread in Italy. Excellent game, good choice.
Yeah, also Sigmata. But I would like to mention that I am not in MS team. I'm an external author, and they adopted my game to add to their lineup. So
Okay, then let's talk about your game, which is Fantasy World, and they
yes.
decided to pick it up and to publish it. What is Fantasy World? I guess it's about fantasy and probably about world building.
Also part of it. So it's the game in the Powered by the Apocalypse family, so to speak. And it's focused on the fantasy adventuring. There's a lot of other games that kind of do the same thing, but I felt that they didn't do it in one big way that for me it was absent, and instead it's my favorite way of experiencing these kind of stories. And so I tried to fill that void, that gap. So one way that I like to describe it, it's fantasy dramatic adventuring. And what this means, I usually have to explain this to Italians, because in Italian, dramatic, it's like sad and tearful. That's not the thing. It's like engaging, humane, passionate, because the kind of stories that it allows players to create and the world, which would be the GM, to create together, is more like what you would read in a fantasy novel or in a fantasy TV series or movie, than, for example, the classic Dungeons and Dragons kind of game fantasy, where you have mechanical bits like the mission and the tactical combat with a lot of numbers and miniatures. And it's more about the action. And of course, you can put story and passion into it, but it's more of a personal addition to the game than what the game itself supports and offers. And instead, Fantasy World can have missions and can, of course, have combat, and it's also quite brutal, and some tactical elements, but it's more focused on your characters, who they are as people, and what the world around them is for them and for the people they touch and live with their actions, and the consequences of that. Every character has a sort of inbuilt narrative arc.
Okay.
The game mechanics help the world create story beats and keep the spotlight always on the important and interesting things for the people at the table. All of this without having to know anything about narrative theory or any of those good guidelines that tell you do something cool without actually giving you the tools to do it in practice.
Okay.
So
I'm very interested in how the story arcs are baked into the characters. So do you kind of choose a story arc, or is it a little bit like that talking with the GM, you can kind of get an inkling and then the GM chooses a path for you? How does it work?
So, like most Powered by the Apocalypse games, the gameplay is emergent. So you don't prepare a story beforehand. The GM doesn't do it, the players don't do it. You don't write a detailed background for your characters. The main part of the fun is to play to find out what happens next, or to explore the world, the setting, but also to explore your character. You have an idea, you start with that, and then you get surprised by the things they do moment by moment because of their emotional reactions or hard choices they will have to face. The character arc part of it is twofold. So on the one hand, game is focused on the fellowship. This is a kind of game where you have the classic fantasy group, but unlike others where you are supposed as players to stick to the group because yes, and because through a lot of experience you learned the hard lessons of groups that go their separate ways without agreeing on it, so it's problematic. Fantasy World gives you a structure that you use at the beginning of the campaign to create your characters and the actual setting, and you create your fellowship. There are four actually, archetypes that you don't need to know it, but if you notice it, they map into four main types of campaign. Two are local, like you are the defenders or the caretakers of a setting or a settlement, a location that you care about. Another one is also local, but it's like you're criminals trying to get power and influence in an area. And the other two instead are wandering, like you have a big quest, a thing that brings you all together that you have to do. And so you travel around the place to manage to do that. And the last one is you have a job. This is what you do for a living, maybe because you're drifters seeking adventure and fun, or you are mercenaries or professionals or something that brings you again around the nation or around the setting, doing the thing you do. And all of these archetypes are actually developed with questions and options that you can pick and choose to get more specific and start off the game. So this already gives a strong indication of what kind of stories and adventures the group wants to face along their campaign. This is all fictional. There are no stats or numbers attached to the fellowship, unlike other games like Blades in the Dark, where you actually have options, points, so you build a hideout. You can do that too here, but it's just narrative.
Okay.
And it's not constrictive. You can start as the defenders of a town and a village, but because reasons the story brings you to travel, that's fine. It's just a starting point to keep everyone together and in the same direction.
And give them a reason to work together and not against each other. Okay.
This also has mechanical weight where the game mechanics help the GM and the players play their characters to the hilt. Like if they want to argue with each other, if they have a fight with each other, if they disagree and want to part ways or have other things to do or want to betray each other, technically they can, and the game supports you in getting to the interesting bits of that and resolving that, but always with the idea that the focus of the game is the fellowship. So if you say, fuck you all, this is enough, I go my own way, you can, and the game will help you get to a satisfactory end to that, but then you get out of the spotlight. So the character is parked. It could have behind the scenes developments, but you then create a new character that can actually stick to the fellowship. Okay. So tries to get both happy. The other half of the character arcs is every character is defined first and foremost as a person. Mm-hmm. In the character creation procedures, you first select a bunch of things that are elements that characterize you as an individual, yet even before you select your class, the bunch of skills that make you kind of unique in the game. Among these, there are two elements. I call them issue and doubt. And they are actually the main thing that will provide you with growth points, experience, leveling, although there are no levels in this game. You can upgrade your character. Mm-hmm. And pretty much these are made to express two things that are central to most characters, protagonist characters in narrative of any kind and genre. I won't get into the narrative theory, but basically there's something that drives you to do to action. You want to change something in the world. It could be a personal thing, could be a big social epic thing. It doesn't matter.
The issues.
Yes. And then you also have something else that opposes you constantly. It's always an internal thing. Like the obstacle is not that the door is clogged. The obstacle is that maybe you are afraid of what you will find on the other side of the door, or that you don't think you are able to open the door, or some other thing. The procedures guide the players into creating this. And these two things, being at the center of what gives you progression and experience, and how it works at the end of every game session, it will have characters do whatever they want for some obvious reasons that are on the table for everyone to see and appreciate and play on if they want. And they will change, because these things are not monolithic and fixed in stones. You have your first idea, maybe it's vague, maybe it's weak, it doesn't matter. At the end of every session, you evaluate these elements, among others, to get your progress points, your growth points. And you have a chance specific there every time. It's like a ritual. At the end of every session, your issue, is it fine like that? Do you want to change it a bit? Do you think it's resolved? Do you think it's not interested anymore? You just want to change it? And all of these options, they have mechanical consequences. Sometimes it's just a little point. Sometimes you actually grow a lot, because if you say, this thing, it's not relevant to me anymore. I want to go another direction. This is growth for the character. So you are actually rewarded for change. But that then changes also your doubt, because that's specific to the issue. So your whole goal and drive changes. Maybe because what you did in the story solved it, or maybe because how you feel about it changed it. And you can also slightly change it at the end of every session. So what was vague at the beginning, you can reward it incrementally without having to think too much about it. You just play, and at some point it becomes obvious to you, and it works like that.
Yeah,
which
is also a way most people experience it anyways, but this is just a way to put it down in words so everyone can look at it and know what they're dealing with.
Exactly.
Okay. And considering that it's a PBTA game, and most of them have kind of an emergent world building, I guess that's also part of the package that the group and the game master together describe and find out what this world is.
Yes. So the first step of the first session, procedures, actually start with world building. And it can be as simple as 5 minutes saying, okay, do you know Westeros, Game of Thrones? We all like it. Yay. Okay, let's play that. No, nothing more needed. But the procedures ask some questions to help people get on the same page about the tone of the game. Like, oh my God, I'm so tired of grim, dark things. Let's have something more hopeful. Okay. Yes, but not too cartoonish and stupid. Let's be serious. Okay. Just say that and it will be enough. The world is instructed to take note of all of this, and that's important, but it's a brief conversation. Although I have experienced that a lot of groups tend to spend quite some time in this phase, even an hour or two, most of the first session, because it's guided in a way that it's already felt like play, or at least something playful and engaging. You see your ideas getting noted down by others that then reply, but what if the dragons were actually the victims? Whatever. And then it's just the first kernel. You really don't need anything else, because the mechanics will help you explore what possibilities are there and fix whatever is described at the table as, now this we know, this we saw, so it's real, and so it will influence everything else we do later on.
Okay, good. So, how big is this game going to be? So, when are you planning with how big is the book going to be, basically? How much material are we going to get?
So the core rule book is about 300 pages,
Oh,
not exactly A5 format, a tiny little bit bigger. The same format of Dread and Sigmata edited from MS Edizioni. Hardcover with a lot of illustrations. I am the main game designer. The game was mine before anyone else noticed. But I have a co-author in this project, which is Luca Maiorani. He's one of my dear friends from Italian convention, etc. And he's an artist, but also contributed now on some content, especially for the settings that we are preparing. And he is the sole designer and illustrator of the whole book.
oh, wow! That's a lot of work.
Yeah, we just spoiled today the cover for the main rule book. So there's that, and you can have a taste of his style of art there and in our Facebook group. And also everyone that subscribes to our newsletter has been getting until now pieces of art, excerpts from the book, and spoilers of various kinds. But the project is quite ambitious. We wanted to do something nice. So, for example, we are trying to use color to differentiate the various chapters of the book. But also to kind of communicate different kinds of settings, all without being like a punch in the face. It's supposed to be readable, usable, which was one of the principles at the base of my rule design. And we try to transport this also in the book design.
Okay. Now, the important question for everyone who's now very interested into getting a look at it, you are planning to do a Kickstarter. Thing is, when?
So the Kickstarter, if everything goes according to plan, should happen by the end of April, probably the 26th, but it's not super official date, so don't quote me on that too much. And we're trying to build up community and awareness until then. It's going to be a short Kickstarter, not this a month and a half long projects, but more tight and punchier. And because the game is actually already released, it's free for everyone in wiki rulebook format, both in English and in Italian, right now, has been for a while. It made not much sense to have a quick starter, as a lot of other Kickstarter do. And so instead, we created a quick setting. It was voted among a few options by the community. And so Silica, the final name of the setting, will be released for free just before the Kickstarter begins.
Where should we look for that? At the site of MS Edizioni, at the site for Fantasy World, Facebook groups, where are we going to find it?
It will be given to all the people subscribed to the newsletter.
Okay.
But also anyone that later on joins the Kickstarter will get it. And of course, there's the Facebook group that is kind of the core of communication for all the news and the facts, and start the chapter about how this works. Am I playing it right? Or can we have a spoiler about this thing instead of that? So,
okay. Thank you so much, Alessandro. It sounds ambitious, but also very promising.
Thank you for having me. And it's terrifying.
I can imagine.
I'm excited, but...
Yes. Well, then fingers crossed that everything goes fine and we're going to see the Kickstarter at the end of April. Thank you so much.
Thank you.